Everyone. I'm happy to see you here. I know Joni is too. Joni is our wonderful presenter from Rutgers University, and we've had the good fortune of working with her for a few years through our national TA contract. And I'm going to be doing a presentation for you here today, which is sponsored by the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I know Joni is happy with questions kind of throughout, and I'll watch the chat. And the PowerPoint will be sent out probably a few days after the training today. So welcome and thank you, Joni.
Yes, thank you. And just an FYI, sometimes the bandwidth is a little bit wonky if you wanted to turn your cameras off during the presentation, but certainly if you want to talk or say something, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute. We have a nice, small, intimate group today, so we'll have hopefully a lot of engagement and discussion. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of what's probably a very or potentially hectic week for folks today. So we appreciate you taking the time to talk about inclusive work cultures. So we're going to review and hopefully give you some ideas on how to best understand employers' diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. So specifically, we're going to look at features of workplaces that are inclusive of individuals with mental health conditions and all disabilities. We're also going to look at some different methods to assess work culture. And then finally, we'll begin again, this is 1 hour long, but I do have some resources that I'll send out with the PowerPoint on conducting a work culture analysis. And we'll talk a little bit about what a work culture analysis is. So we'll get started. Understanding job seekers and employers' needs leads to a good job match. So we've done some work, and maybe you've attended some of our previous learning communities or other SE webinars that Dawn and Darren have put on over the last few years around job matching and really exploring job seekers' interests and values and preferences and how important it is to develop that career profile. Equally as important is really looking at the employer side, looking at what are employers' needs, what's the work culture like, so that we want to be able to make a good match between what people that we're working with, job seekers, individuals participating in services, what some of their values are, interests, and hopefully find work environments that include many of those skills and qualities and abilities, but also the work culture. And we're going to talk a little bit about what work culture is and how we can help assess the work culture when we're working with someone. So again, we've got information from the career profile. We are looking at employers' needs. We want to ensure a good job match. So the career profile helps to guide some of those next steps, including identifying and building relationships with potential employers with jobs that individuals are interested in pursuing. We use the information from the career profile as well as information about the employer's needs to, again, make that good job match. So any thoughts on how you sort of came into your job? What were some of the pieces of the employer work of the work site or some of the workplace practices or work culture that made you interested in that particular job? What were some things that really lined up with your values and interest? What were some of those factors of a work culture, the practices or the mission or the vision or the goals of the employer? Can anyone talk a little bit about how that resonated with them and their own sort of job matching process. I know for me, one of my values is really working autonomously and having the freedom to kind of create things and identify you know, new content and so on. So finding a job that had that, a job that my supervisor provided that level of autonomy and independence was really important to me. Yes, Paul, you can you can unmute and turn on your camera if you want.
Sure. Yeah. So I never really sought this position out. I never thought that I would be working in supported employment, but after working so many just yakety schmackety big box stores that I don't really care about, like going and making some rich people richer, like I found that I wanted to have a job that I actually felt like I was making a difference,
Mm.
and building up my community and had a sense of purpose that would drive me through the day. Um, yeah,
So it sounds like finding some place that included those values, the values of helping people, the values of making your community a better place, the values of, you know, not necessarily salary or high salary, right? But something that you would be contributing to the good of others and
yeah,
helping others.
yeah. I mean, the salary was a bit of a driving force just in that in this economy, we definitely need a lot more money than
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
did even 5 years ago to get by. So, but yeah, I wanted to, yeah, I needed purpose. I needed for my
Thank you.
occupation to matter. So yes, thank
Thank
you.
you for thank you for sharing that. And we're going to talk as we move forward, and I might even, you know, ask you some additional questions as we talk about how you found out that your particular employer matched your values. We're going to kind of get into that. Thank you. Dawn?
See if I can get unmuted. I thought what I did was clap. I might have raised my hand.
Oh, okay.
It's
Wait,
interesting.
it was a clap. I just misread it. So
Oh, yeah,
uh
that's okay.
I think
I can share too. Um, you know that I've been doing work like this for most of my adult life, in fact, pretty much all of my adult life. And I guess I knew from middle school that I wanted to do something related to social service and you know, working with helping people to improve their quality of life. And this is the ultimate agency to do that in the Healthcare Authority. I mean,
mhm,
the whole focus is improving people's quality of life and helping them to do good self-care, very honestly, which I don't do
yes.
well. So maybe I can learn from my colleagues.
Yes. Thank you, Dawn. So I think I just wanted to make the point here that really a piece of looking at the employer's workplace or looking at the employer side is really looking at the culture of that environment and making sure it includes the values and the interests and kind of what we find important. So what is work culture? Workplaces develop a culture based on people, the purpose, different activities that are included. There's a shared history oftentimes within a work culture. A lot of times people refer work culture as kind of what personality is to an individual. So work culture is like the organization's personality, if you will. Um, it develops over time. It includes different traditions and history. What would you, how would you define work culture? If you were to think about a little bit of that definition I just gave, kind of the people, the purpose, the shared history, the activities potentially, those traditions. An important characteristic is many times work cultures could potentially provide some informal training and include natural supports for individuals that you're working with. Sometimes those natural supports in the workplace, whether it's coworkers or supervisors, oftentimes may be part of that work culture. You may be working in an environment where people just naturally help each other. People are naturally seeing the team as kind of one unit where you're helping each other out. You want your team just to really thrive. There's very little kind of competition, if you will, and that's sometimes found within the work culture. Let's see. That's a tough one. Dawn, the philosophy of the group. Todd, how people feel about the place. Yes, all of those. We want to make sure we're spending some time thinking about the work culture. Oftentimes, individuals with mental health conditions can perform the job tasks, have the skills. Sometimes what creates some difficulties or barriers might be more the interactions and the personal interactions, and maybe not a good work culture fit. So we're going to spend some time looking at work culture, and I have a brief video that shows what some people define work culture as. And I just wanted to, as we're playing the video, think about and pay attention and maybe even jot down or just kind of remember what are some of the definitions that the folks in the video are describing as work culture, what work culture is to them. So I'm going to just, Dawn, I'll rely on you for a thumbs up or a yeah at it playing.
You got it.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah. Audio's good, video's good.
Well, workplace culture is very broad definition, and one of the things came to my mind is very visual that the different companies have different dress codes, and one might be really formal, you have to put a tie on you and every day, and one may be pretty casual, you can wear jeans on Fridays. So you have to be adaptive to any work culture.
To me, workplace culture includes three main important points. The first one would be philosophy of the organization or the company. Are the employees have the same mission or the same value with the companies that can align their work together, and which make their work easier because they have the same belief and the same philosophy. And my second point would be the communication internally and externally between team members and between external stakeholders. For example, the way an employee treats or communicates with other people outside of the company would somehow tell the other people about their company culture. And the last point would be the social environment of the office. For example, is the place or time that employees can hang out together for lunch, for coffee breaks, and even for Fridays or weekends. Are there socials for the employees to hang out?
So I think the work culture can be related to many different stuff. One example is the working environment. In my first co-op, I was working in a cubicle where they focus more on the privacies of each workers. But in my second co-op, I was working in an open space where the people communication are more encouraged because everybody is just sitting in one space and there's no walls around. Yeah, I think that can actually, the setup of the working place can actually influence the way that people communicate. In cubicle, people will prefer to use the email to communicate, while in open space, people are just prefer to use direct communication in prison.
So what were some of the definitions of work culture that you heard people in the video defining it as? What were some of the key areas that they noted? You can unmute or use the chat, whatever your preference. All working toward the same mission, yes. So somehow we need to find what the mission is, right, of the workplace, or help job seekers we're working with find what that mission is. So to make sure it's a good match. K, the social environment and work environment, how communication was done with internal employees as well as external folks. Yep. Todd, dress, communication, employee values align with the employers. Absolutely. Any other areas that they talked about? I think you addressed all of them. I don't know if anyone mentioned the privacy and the work environment that the last person was talking about. They were referring to working in private setting versus out in the open, and that's something to really be mindful and pay attention to as well. And that's part of the work culture. So why is understanding work culture important? Why is this an important piece to your work as employment specialists, job coaches, job developers? Why is understanding work culture important? Because if there is a disparity between someone and the work culture of the place, they're less likely to stay or be happy there. Absolutely. And I'll throw out another question to kind of look at this through our own lens of our own kind of career paths. If you think about jobs that you've had and just what Kay mentioned here, if there's a disparity between someone in the workplace, you're less likely to be happy, less likely to stay. Have you ever had a job that you're comfortable talking about that kind of fit that it wasn't, the values weren't aligned, the culture just did not really seem to be in sync with what your interests were, what your values were, and what was kind of the outcome of that? Paul wrote, helps create a sense of if values are not aligned, the customers will be the ones that suffer greatly. Helps create a sense of belonging when values and mission match. Kay, you had wanted to say a little bit more about that question?
Yeah, I did an internship at a computer repair place years ago, and there was a big workplace culture gap between me and the people I was working with, where I was showing up early every day, and sometimes the people running the store weren't even showing up to open the store on the weekend. Um, it definitely got pretty frustrating pretty quick to see the amount of effort that was being put in was so inconsistent across the board. It just it felt I don't know, it just was not, it ended up not being a good fit.
Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see how maybe paying a little bit more attention to the work culture early on is important when we're helping to, when we're working with people who may not have worked for a while, may have been out of the workforce for a little bit, to find that environment that's a good fit. What ended up happening, Kay? Just didn't work out.
I ended up just having to leave that internship. It wasn't getting me anything, and
Mhm.
the environment was not conducive to me learning anything there.
Yeah. Anyone else? Let's see. I think there was something else in the chat, Dawn. Oh, Todd wrote, helps create a sense of belonging when values and mission match. Are they willing to work with our participants to easily accommodate any of the disabilities, or are they rigid and unwilling to compromise or work together? Yes, that's very important to know. How amenable is the environment or the workplace to providing accommodations? So I think we kind of solidified that understanding work culture is important. But how do we look at work culture, and more importantly, what makes a work culture inclusive? So I'm going to throw that out to you. What makes a work culture inclusive? And when we talk about inclusivity, we're talking about all things: race, gender, disability. What makes a work culture inclusive?
I want to mention the forms, the hiring documents, having inclusive language on there specifically
Yes,
around gender. If you're
yes,
working with clients, having intake documents as well, or documents the clients can fill out to represent themselves.
yes, absolutely. Thank you, Andrea. Dawn, employees are similar to the customers or people being served. Yes, so there's um, that similarity. Person-centered interaction. They see and recognize the employees. Yes, so the workplace is really kind of looking at their employees and recognizing and having that person-centeredness.
Well, and Kay hopped on and said, representation of people of different backgrounds, the willingness to meet people where they are and support them.
Yes, that's a great definition. Jennifer mentioned earlier, we talked about natural supports. Feel this is very important. Yes, so having those natural supports can create that inclusive work culture. The Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse does a lot of disability related research and writing and, topics around this area. And they define the culture as involves the full and successful. So when we think about inclusive cultures, one definition that they define is it involves the full and successful integration of people who are diverse into a workplace or industry, not limited simply to basic representation. It indicates a climate in which respect, equity, and positive recognition of differences are all cultivated. I think that definition, the longer one I just referenced, had pretty much everything that you all just wrote in the chat or discussed, that employees are recognized, right? Full representation. Like Dawn said in the chat, people, are representative of the company as a whole. It's not just a simple basic representation of someone. People are fully integrated. So an inclusive culture has people integrated through all levels of the organization and the hierarchy. So we talked about why workplaces is important. So why is understanding these inclusive aspects important as job coaches, job developers. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit. It can certainly help when we're assisting someone in the job search, job matching, and then also the job support piece, the natural supports that are already available on the job, or other areas that we might be able to help the person identify and seek out if necessary, if it is an inclusive workplace culture. When assisting and assessing work culture, and when I talk about this, could be something that you as employment consultants, employment specialists, job developers can be doing independent of the person, but it's certainly something that you could be talking with the job seeker about and assisting the person in assessing the work culture. And I could see just sharing something like this, assisting the person looking at the mission or the vision, going online, seeing what their policies and philosophies are, really encouraging the person that you're working with to do some of their own level of assessing, so that they can kind of, when they're, moving into different jobs throughout their career, they have an idea of how to assess this very critical piece of the work environment. So we want to look at these 8 areas. These are the components that make up work culture for the most part. We're going to talk about each of these. So when we look at these 8 areas, we want to look at leadership. What's the style of leadership? Is it traditional hierarchy? Is there another type of leadership? How do leaders communicate with each other? How do they communicate with employees? Are there formal and informal leaders? If you think about your own work environments, are there people who kind of naturally rise as leaders, even if they don't have a particular title, as director or manager, but they've somehow naturally rose to kind of these informal leaders? What are the characteristics of these formal and informal leaders? And how do those leaders gain trust from employees? And then when we kind of go look at management, how are decisions made? Do employees make decisions, or are they made mostly by management? How are employees supported? So as we're going through each one, think about different questions that you might ask, whether you're kind of going in that relationship building, in your job development, meeting with employers and wanting to touch on some of these types of work culture areas. Think about additional questions that you might want to ask. Workplace practices. How is training done? How is ongoing training done? So you might want to ask something like, describe the ongoing training and development in the organization, or what are opportunities for advancement? How is wellness addressed? And how is a work-life balance addressed? Is there paid time off for sick leave? Policies and philosophies. What's the dress code? What are some of the attendance policies? What's the organization's philosophy on hiring, pay, and promotion? What do you think some of the questions around people of the organization might be? What would be some questions to get a better sense of what the people are like in the organization? You can use the chat or unmute your mic. If we want to gain a better understanding or support job seekers in gaining a better understanding about people and how that relates to the work culture, what might be some questions that you would want to ask? And I've been asking a lot of these questions, and they're not here on the slides, but I do what I will send on a work culture analysis which includes all of those kind of questions that I was just asking. So don't worry about writing them all down. You'll get a Word document with all of those and more so that you can kind of do your own work culture analysis. But when we think about people in the organization, what are the types of interactions like between coworkers? Are they collaborative? Are they more independent? Are they more task oriented? You know, are they more, you know, I have something that needs to get done. I know that John can help me with this task, or are they more social? Do people, you know, spend some time chatting and having lunch together and talking about social things? In what ways do coworkers support each other? You know, is there that opportunity for natural support? The mission and vision and values. What are some of the organization's beliefs? What values and beliefs and part of the mission reflects an inclusive work culture? What's the work environment like? The one person on the video mentioned, you know, is it private? Are there, you know, open? Is it more of an open area? What's hanging in the offices? That can kind of give us a clue on maybe what some of the work culture is like, right? So what would be some things that could be present in offices or hanging up, or that you might see that could give you some indication that maybe the workplace values wellness or work-life balance? What are some things that you could be kind of attentive to when you're going in to a certain business that they might be hanging up or laying around, or visually that could suggest that they're interested in work-life balance for their employees, or there is wellness is important?
You know, when I
Or
do
others?
or have done job development in the past, I pay attention to the staff that are there, and are they smiling and happy appearing?
Yes, absolutely. How are people responding? How do people seem? Are there, you know, signs in the workplace that talk about, you know, the types of mental health benefits that might be offered, or maybe there's, you know, support opportunities during, you know, high stress times in people's lives. Maybe it's, you know, the holidays are coming up. We have these groups or these resources to help. Anytime you can see some visual signs or physical signs in the workplace, it could give you some indication how they might treat wellness and work-life balance or other, you know, signs of inclusivity. And then communications. I think people in the chat mentioned this. What's the manner of communication? How often? What's the type? Is it mostly email? Is it mostly phone? Is it texting? How frequently? Is it expected that you return your coworkers' emails within a certain amount of time? I think I always mention this when I do this webinar around work culture. In our workplace, it's very common, and maybe this is common in yours as well. If you send an email, you might just get back a little okay, like literally a lowercase o and k. And in the beginning, you kind of like think, like, does that person not like me, or, you know, am I being annoying? But then you begin to realize that's part of our work culture. People just quickly respond in the moment. Nothing, you know, no one uses exclamation marks or other kind of, you know, emojis. It's very matter of fact. And sometimes if you're not used to that, that may be off-putting, or that may be something that you're not sure of, and it could question yourself. So you want to think about, what are those interactions like, and so on. How do people dress on the job if we're thinking about work environment? Also communications. What topics do people discuss? How are problems resolved in the workplace? And again, I have the whole Word document that I'll send along with this. But think about your own workplace and these areas, and we have like a little bit of a activity that we're going to look at our own workplaces in just a bit. But think about how those 8 components of a workplace kind of play out in your own work environment. Diversity, equity, inclusion includes all the ways in which people differ and includes different qualities and that make one individual or group different from one another. It includes race, ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, religion, disability, affectional orientation, education status, socioeconomic status, and so on. And it could also be differences related to someone's ideas or ways of looking at things or someone's values. Inclusion really is defined as all employees, regardless of their differences, are respected and valued members of the organization. Again, the Burton Blatt Institute talks about these 3 important features of inclusive work cultures. When we're helping someone assess work culture, or we're out there assisting, when we're job developing, assessing the work culture, we want to pay attention to representation includes the presence of people with disabilities throughout an organization. Again, you might not know whether or not a person has a disability, but you can find that out maybe doing some online research or looking at the mission or values, and in various roles. So representation of people with disabilities throughout the organization, and in different roles. So, all the way through leadership roles. Receptivity is having a respect for any differences in the style in which employees work, including employers having flexibility to tailor different positions based on a person's strengths and skill sets. So kind of being receptive to the idea that, there's some flexibility in terms of where a person might fit best with their skill set and their interest and their strengths. Fairness refers to all employees having equal access to all resources or opportunities or networks, how decisions are made. So there's a level of fairness. If there are training opportunities or, leadership, maybe there's something, build your leadership skills by attending this training. A fair workplace has that training available for anyone within that workplace, not just certain individuals. So again, kind of thinking about these 3 areas that the Burton Blatt Institute defines of inclusive work cultures. Are they representative throughout all levels of the organization? Are they receptive, and are they fair? In employment services, we're always building relationships with employers. Specifically, learning about a company's work culture includes suggestions here on the slide, as well as building relationships, meeting with employers out in the community. Other ways to build relationships include Chamber of Commerce meetings or other kind of business functions out in the community. But here are some suggestions. Online research. So what are some ways you could do online research? You could, Google the company and help the person look at, does even just first glance, does it appear as though it's inclusive? Or what's this culture like? What are the company employees like? Like Dawn mentioned, are they smiling? Are they happy? When you go in to build that relationship with the employer, and you might go in, different times of the day, or you might interact with different people. is there a similar quality, or, you know, are people, like Dawn said, smiling and laughing and seem to be enjoying, or does it seem like people aren't really exhibiting those kind of happiness? Kay said stuff like Glassdoor post from ex-employees. Yes, so looking at Glassdoor, looking at, you know, feedback and reviews, companies' values. You can have, you know, again, kind of seeing what the company's values are. The next slide, I think I'm going to share 15 kind of known companies that have good DEI policies and practices. So there might even be companies that you know of, just from the research that you've done, that they value diversity, that they value inclusivity. Questions during the interview. Some questions might be, I see diversity is listed in your company's values. Can you share some examples of how you promote this? How is diversity shown to be an important value at this company? So during the interview, whether it's the job seeker during their interview with the employer, or maybe it's during one of your job development, relationship building meetings with the employer. Maybe asking questions about, does the company offer managers training on diversity, equity, and inclusion? So what types of training is offered to supervisors, so that the whole workplace, not just what they have written on the website, or not just what maybe the, you know, CEO is saying, but is that type of training offered throughout? What does the company do to help ensure inclusion? What types of benefits are offered? So those are some questions that you can think of during the interview that really get at what are those inclusive practices? You know, how is the diversity shown in the workplace? Networking with connections. So it might be an opportunity to do some informational interviewing, right? So not an interview to necessarily get the job, but maybe the job seeker and you can craft different questions around diversity or around the work culture, and see if an employee in a company that the person is interested in working at would be willing to meet with them for a brief amount of time to ask some of those questions, to really get at what's that type of environment like. And then employee benefits. Does the employee receive benefits that are relevant for that job seeker? Are mental health benefits similar and of equal value than physical health benefits? What other benefits are included? Are there other wellness types of benefits, and so on? What are some other ways that you can learn about a company's workplace practices and cultures? And that link here at the bottom, again, kind of gives you some additional questions, expands on what I had just mentioned. So you could go into that resource and get a lot more information and specific questions. But what are other ways that maybe you have in the past, or you can see as ways to examine a company's workplace practice and culture that may not be listed? Networking with connections could include networking in business to business environments like the chamber meetings I mentioned, or Society for Human Resource Management meetings or get-togethers or events, or even having, sometimes supported employment programs have a business advisory board where they might work with different businesses in their community. And again, it's not just about jobs for individuals, but really learning about those types of industries or those types of work environments. Checking the Better Business Bureau. Yes. Yep. Checking to see, kind of similar to looking at reviews and checking to see what's been said about the company. Consumer-based rating websites. Yes. I love that. So these are 15 companies of 2023 resource. I couldn't find anything that's more current than that, but that's fairly current. Identifies 15 companies that have standout recruiting policies and strategies to improve their DEI practices. Jennifer is kind of following up on that previous question. I've checked licensing and inspection information for childcare providers, for people looking for those types of jobs. Excellent, excellent. So yeah, this resource kind of provides, you know, a list, and they really look at what some of those areas are. So for example, I don't know if any of you use Box, but that is one of the 15 that has these kind of standout and effective recruiting policies around diversity, educational testing services. I know we have one here in New Jersey, in Princeton, ETS. Anheuser-Busch is also listed in this. And it goes on to see, and you can log in and kind of check it out a little bit more. You know, what specifically they have in their policies, in their mission and vision statements on the website, what they actually do in terms of recruitment. Some specifically mention disabilities. Some are more general in terms of the diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that they have, but certainly worth looking into, and wish we had more time to do that. But you'll have these resources that you'll be able to access all of these links and information. So I did want us to have kind of a learning application, practice this a bit, to kind of get us thinking about how we can assist individuals we're working with, and using our own employment setting, or if you're thinking, if you're working with someone, a job seeker who is kind of at that point where you're doing some job development, and they have an employment setting in mind, and you've, you know, toured the setting, and you have some idea about some of the bolded areas here. So we're just going for this particular activity, we're just going to look at workplace practices, policies and philosophies, people and work environment. I was gonna do a breakout group, but I think sometimes we lose people in breakout sessions. So why don't we do this as a larger group, and we can use the chat, unmute your mics. We have a little bit of time to do that. But think about your own setting, or maybe a past job that you've had. Maybe there's someone that you're working with that you've done some kind of advanced job development. You have some idea of these areas, but let's think about those 4 areas listed, and what are some questions that you might want to ask in order to find out about that work site, or what is your work site like? So for example, people. So if you think about your own work environment, and your own work setting or a previous setting, what are the types of interactions between coworkers like? What are the types of interactions between supervisors and coworkers? And if you're comfortable sharing, that's great. Dawn, do you think a breakout session would be helpful? We've got a few minutes to do that.
You know,
Do you think?
I think this group has been pretty interactive and doing well with being in the group. So I think,
Yes.
yeah, I think perhaps this is good. I
Yeah.
think your vote towards let's just do
Yeah, I think
it in a
so.
larger group.
So think about, and you can unmute your mic if that's easier, or write in the chat. either a past work environment or your current work environment, what are the types of interactions between coworkers and what are the types of interactions between supervisors and coworkers? Are they collaborative or independent? Are they task oriented or are they more social? In what ways do coworkers support each other? What are some additional questions that you might ask to get at what the people are like in a work setting? I know for me, if we think about the types of interactions between coworkers and if they're task oriented or social, they always seem to start out as task oriented. But I know when I need support and when I need to just kind of touch base with someone, we work primarily remotely, so we don't really work in an office anymore. It always starts out around some task, but then it always kind of goes into something more social, which I think is really helpful for our team, just because we aren't together as often.
Right. And I don't think that you can have one without the other, really. Like that, it's both going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
I'm in a really weird place right now because like I actually just started working with a new company about a month ago. And they're all super, super friendly, very welcoming. They are really heavy on the social, but it's really heavy on the tasks as well. And
Okay.
like in the past, when I've been in situations where it's like this level of social and this level of friendly, like it ended up being like this really toxic work environment. So like it's just automatically got me on edge.
Okay.
But then I can also see like a lot of my coworkers have been there for like 15, 20 years, something like that. And I'm like, okay, toxic work environments don't hang on to people that long.
That's an excellent point. That's a great point. And that may be something when you're thinking about what are some additional questions you might ask if you're wanting to find out about the people, whether it's in an interview or, your interactions with the employer, you might want to say, how long do people usually stay? Because I think that's a good insight, Paul. Thank you. Kay wrote, I know at a job I worked previously, we were all pretty tight knit and would cover for each other if someone needed time off or needed to work another day, etc. Our supervisor was pretty hands off and trusted everyone to get their job done. Yes, that's an important to note. Always checking in with each other about life outside of work and discussion about work boundaries. Yes. So absolutely, those. Let me see, one more here. I've been working for the same agency for 5 years, but I recently moved between departments. Previously, my manager would meet with me if there were issues, but would communicate mostly via email or Teams. In my new team, it's much more collaborative. Yeah, so, that's all part of the work culture. And kind of knowing what areas to look for and what types of questions are helpful. Again, work environment. Think about your own setting, your own job, or a past employer. What's hanging in offices or common areas? Are they open or private? Are they cluttered or neat? What are some physical signs of inclusivity in your own work environments? You can use the chat or unmute your mic.
I just want to say I'm glad that work environment's on here. A place I had worked at, there had been great, fantastic manager who retired, and then another manager came along, wonderful, got a better offer somewhere else. And then we had a manager that came in and the environment changed dramatically. It was like a ghost town.
Yeah.
We did share an office with another agency. That office had moved. This manager maybe didn't think we needed another agency in that office, but the clients would come in and sometimes they'd mention that they were uncomfortable because it was like a apocalypse zone. There's nothing in there,
Yeah.
broken furniture, expired hand sanitizer. So thinking about the work environment and like the comfortability in it, I think it's also the environment, but the people in the environment. So to me, those kind of integrate
Yes.
together because this person dramatically changed the environment. And the office closed down.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Yep. I was in a similar situation in one of my past jobs where the change of leadership dramatically changed the work environment, and it was very visible. So thank you for mentioning that. And then if we go on to talk about practices, how are people recruited? What's the ongoing training like? What are opportunities for advancement? And then let's pay particular attention to this fourth question about workplace practices. How is wellness addressed in your work environment or past work environment? You know, is there pay time off or sick leave?
So where I work right now is fantastic. I work at the Healthcare Authority with John and Darren. Hello. It's incredible. I've never worked a place where they meet you where you're at with your mental health and lived experience. It's welcoming, and that's part of the inclusivity. You don't feel scared to share your mental health or talk about your stress or being burned out for that matter.
It's
What was
great.
the other question? Sorry.
No, that was it. How's wellness, you know, how's pay time off and wellness addressed? You know, that's all part of looking at the culture and seeing if it'll be a good fit. And it sounds like, Andrea, you know, that was probably something that you explored a bit when you were looking into your, you know, what career, what setting that you were wanting to land on.
Correct.
And then policies and philosophies, you know, dress code, attendance. Some places have very flexible attendance policies. Maybe something that you're, you know, talking about, Andrea, the kind of meeting where you are. Some places might be more formal, and that all factors into a good job fit. So we're at the end. And again, all of those materials that we talked about, particularly around those areas of work culture, I'll send Dawn a Word document that you could just type right into that addresses those areas to give you something to use when you're doing an analysis. So we talked about how to really better understand what those practices are that make an employer or make a business inclusive. We talked about those, you know, areas to look for and why it's important in our jobs, and particularly around the job matching, to really check out a company's work culture. Any questions or comments? We have about a minute. And then always throw in the chat too if there's anything that you'd like to see for future sessions. Dawn, Darren, and I are always looking for input around what would be helpful. So please add that to the chat or reach out to Dawn or Darren. Some work culture resources, some other resources, references. And then if you could kindly complete the survey, I'll also put it in the chat. We appreciate it. And I think there might even be a spot on the survey where you can write what additional topics you would be interested in having for these learning community calls that we have here on the third Thursday. And then I know that there are other SE webinars that are getting planned throughout the next few years. So thank you very much. And I'll also put my email in the chat.
Great information, thought-provoking. I appreciate that piece of things. And I know when I do teaching of job development, I went out with a couple of gals in the Spokane area last week to do some job development, just to sort of mentor each other, and some great things that you brought up today that I'm going to include next time I do that. So
Great.
thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all of your great interaction, and see you next month.
Happy holidays.
Yes, you too.